My name is Aisha and I am the Senior Associate for Programs and Outreach. Now all participants are currently muted and your cameras are switched off. If you have a question for the panelists specific to the topic at hand, please type it into the Q&A box below. We will do our best to have the panel speakers to address your questions either during the panel session or the Q&A segment. You may also use the same function to notify our team if you are facing technical difficulties. It is now my pleasure to introduce our President, Georgette Tan, who will give the opening address.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to the first Gender Equality Impact Awards and panel discussion organized by United Women Singapore. As some of you may be aware, UWS is actually reaching its first anniversary. To be precise, October 25th, this weekend, would make it our 1-year anniversary. And what a first 12 months it's been. It's been an absolute roller coaster ride for us, but also everybody else too. And we've had to cope, like everybody, with the effects of the pandemic. And while it has been obviously very challenging, it's also been an opportunity for us to change, to pivot, to transform ourselves, and to find out exactly what it is we are going to be focused on. Despite all the changes, a few things have remained the same. Our 4 Ps, as some of you may be familiar with, our purpose. In fact, if anything, we are more committed to our purpose of empowering women, gender equality, and building the pipeline of future women leaders. Our second P, that of people, our various stakeholders, our internal staff, as well as our members, volunteers, supporters, sponsors, and everybody that we work with. The third P is that of programming. And this is where we've really focused our energies in expanding and deepening our programming suite. And last but not least, partnerships. Because without our partnerships, we would be nothing. And in this instance today, I really want to thank our friends at the EU Commission for their generous support, not only for this event, but in the past years too. So without further ado, we are going to go ahead with our panel discussion, followed by our awards, which, as many of you know, recognize organizations, men, women, and youth who have championed initiatives, innovative activities in Singapore and around in order to advance gender equality and empower women, both in the workplace as well as the community. I stress again that we would not be able to do this event were it not for the support of our many supporters, our sponsors, our great moderator, our panel, and our amazing judging panel too. So without further ado, let's get started. And I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker today. Our keynote speaker is Ambassador Barbara Plinkert, who is Ambassador to the European Union to Singapore. Her Excellency Barbara Plinkert, her term started in Singapore in 2017. And in addition to the numerous business, trade, foreign relations, and cultural responsibilities that Her Excellency carries out on a daily basis, we know her to be a committed advocate for gender equality and women's empowerment. And we at UWS are very grateful to have Her Excellency's support and to have her here with us today. Your Excellency.
sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much for this introduction. Georgette Tan, President of United Women Singapore, nominees and later winners of the Gender Equality Impact Awards, ladies and gentlemen, participants in this event today. A very good day to all of you at this first digital Gender Equality Impact Award ceremony and the Gender Equality panel discussion that we are going to have a bit later. It's my really great pleasure and privilege to address you at this important event where men, women, and organizations in Singapore who have championed initiatives to advance gender equality and the empowerment of women in the workplace and in the community are recognized and celebrated today. I'd like really to thank United Women Singapore for making their achievements visible. And thank you also for giving me the opportunity to address you on this occasion. Equality between women and men is in fact a core priority for the European Union, as it is one of our founding values. It goes back to 1957 when the principle of equal pay for equal work became part of the Treaty of Rome. And until today, we continue to attach high priority to this important cause, as it remains work in progress. Gender equality is also a key principle under international law, and this year, in which we celebrate many anniversaries, marks an excellent opportunity for reviewing achievements, but also gaps in implementing the various legal instruments globally. More precisely, let me say that in 2020, we celebrate the 20th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, the 40th anniversary of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and also the 10th anniversary of UN Women. There's indeed a momentum. Not only is this year's Nobel Prize winner for literature a woman, who's Mrs. Gluck, but also are the ones for physics and chemistry. Overall, we see more and more girls studying STEM subjects, meaning science, technology, and engineering or mathematics. And we see more women succeed in sciences than before. Women are also increasingly present in leadership positions, and more countries are led by female leaders. These are all positive developments, and progress has undoubtedly been made in narrowing the gender gap, but we are still far away from closing it. And this is true for most countries globally. Gender stereotypical thinking, creating categories of what is perceived as male and female, and bias affecting both women and men still persist. We can also take the example of parenthood, where traditional gender roles are still in place due to historical and cultural reasons. For example, in many places, bringing up children continues to be regarded as mainly or solely the responsibility of a mother. Being a parent continues to impact women's access to the labor market and career progression, reflecting the disproportionate weight of care duties on mothers. Historically, gender equality has been seen mainly as a women's issue, as women have been the driving force behind gender equality strategies and struggles. But in recent years, it has increasingly been acknowledged that men and boys are also inextricably involved and that they have an important role to play in achieving equality. Whereas in the past, there has been a perception that women are the only ones who benefit from a more equal society, there's now a greater understanding that gender equality will benefit all of society, and everyone will benefit from a more equal society. There's now, and that it's in nobody's interest if half of society is marginalized or not given equal opportunities. Indeed, there's a strong business case. There's a strong business case, as according to research done in the EU, gender equality would contribute to an increase in GDP per capita in the European Union by 2.2 to 3% by 2050. So I really look forward to the discussion later on how men can champion gender diversity, as it is as much their topic as it is a women's topic. There are many approaches to closing the gender gap. For example, promoting girls in STEM education areas could help reduce the skills gap, increase employment and productivity of women, and reduce occupational segregation. In the EU, it's also part of our policy to promote positive masculinity and to support activities that challenge gender stereotypes. The term positive masculinity means behaviors and models that broaden the usual image of what is normally seen as male. It contributes to deconstructing gender stereotypes. And so it can help to involve more men in the discussion about gender. Ladies and gentlemen, clearly both the EU and Singapore are taking decisive steps in advancing gender equality. The recent announcement of the Singapore government to enter into an in-depth process of reviewing women's issues with a view to charting a path towards greater gender equality in the next months is very commendable. As for action in the EU, first of all, I'd like to say that the European Commission is led since December last year for the first time by a female president, Ursula von der Leyen. A union of equality is one of her priorities. We also have a new gender equality strategy in place for 2020 to 2025. The emphasis is on promoting equal economic independence for women and men, closing the gender pay gap, advancing gender balance in decision-making, achieving equal participation across different sectors of economy, and ending gender-based violence, among others. The strategy includes the involvement of a whole range of stakeholders, and that I think is extremely important, including not only the EU institutions and member states, but also civil society, social partners, trade unions, and the private sector. While the strategy focuses on actions within the EU, it tallies also with the EU's external policy on gender equality and supporting women's empowerment all over the world. For example, we promote gender equality through political dialogue, including human rights dialogues with our partners and development cooperation programs with third countries, as well as through our trade policy. The EU is also a major player in international fora on gender equality. More concretely, relating to the collaboration between the EU and ASEAN, promoting gender equality, particularly the empowerment of women and girls, is an important priority for both of our regions. The topic featured strongly in the second high-level ASEAN-EU dialogue on sustainable development that took place in February of this year. The dialogue highlighted that strengthening the financial inclusion of women and promoting women entrepreneurship, especially in micro, small, and medium enterprises, was key to reaching the objectives of equality and of women and girls' empowerment. The EU will continue to support ASEAN countries in their efforts to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, including, obviously, Goal 5 on gender equality. Ladies and gentlemen, let me finally turn to a subject that cannot be ignored in this unprecedented year 2020, in which the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has affected everyone around the globe in a fundamental and even dramatic way. Lockdowns and self-isolation, together with the economic impact of COVID-19, have left millions of girls, women, and people of all genders vulnerable to a growing shadow pandemic of violence, including domestic violence and cyber harassment, and with limited access to help. In many countries around the world, the pandemic has also created new inequalities, including access to digital services, the right to health, the right to information, and the right to development. The most vulnerable in societies, including women and girls, feel the strongest impact. However, the pandemic-caused isolation has also provided a new incentive for people to go digital, and operators have lowered barriers by making it easier to sign up for internet-based services. Technology can also be life-saving, a life-saving line of defense, whether via instant messaging services with geolocation function, free calls to domestic abuse hotlines, or discrete apps that provide support to victims of violence. In terms of responses to COVID-19, it has to be recognized and cannot be overemphasized that women play a disproportionate role. Nearly 70% of frontline health workers and social workers are women. Women also shoulder a large share of unpaid care work, and they are critical actors in the sustainable development of all countries. In order to ensure that no one is left behind in the process of recovery from COVID-19, that still lies ahead of all of us. We must ensure that women are included in all response and recovery decisions. This is the only way to build back in such a way that all of society benefits. I'd like to conclude with a quote from our President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Gender equality is a core principle of the European Union, but it's not yet a reality. In business, politics, and society as a whole, we can only reach our full potential if we use all of our talent and diversity. Using only half of the population, half of the IT, and half is not good. I come back to the important work done by organizations and individual women and men by championing women's empowerment and equal opportunities. And I really look forward to witness some excellent examples by being honored here today. So thank you once again for this opportunity to participate in an important panel discussion and event. And I really look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. That was indeed very inspiring. And I was taking copious notes as you were going along, which I'm sure we will discuss later in the debate. But thank you. That was very, very well thought through and clearly laid out, including making the business case for gender equality. So thank you again. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For this next segment, we're shifting gears a bit and we'll talk about the panel discussion. And before we get started, I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Shai, but I'm not. My name is Shai Ganu. I lead Willis Towers Watson's executive compensation practice globally. So for those of you who don't know, Willis Towers Watson is a global professional services firm. We have 140,000 employees in sort of 40 markets. Sorry, other way around, 40,000 employees in 140 markets. Three broad lines of business: corporate risk and broking, which is the insurance broking part, human capital and benefits, the part that I represent, and investment risk and reinsurance. Diversity, gender equality, ESG, representation, these are all subjects very close to my heart. These are subjects very close to our heart as a firm. And I'm also honored to be here, and thanks for the invitation from Georgette. Georgette and I also serve on Board Agenda, the committee by SCWO that looks at promoting women on boards in Singapore. So for this panel discussion, we are very fortunate to have some distinguished personalities and some very clever minds and sort of prominent personalities to share their views about gender equality and specifically what motivates men to champion gender diversity. Now, to try to keep this panel more interactive, rather than me read through a script to introduce each one of our panelists, we thought we'll do something slightly different. We'll go through each one of the panelists and ask them to introduce themselves, but also very quickly share what is it that motivates them, or what is it that drives them to champion this cause. So you'll hear a little bit about their professional backgrounds, but also a little bit about their personal motivations about why is it that they believe in this cause. And before I hand over to our first panelist, maybe a little bit about why I'm here and what motivates me. On the business front, as Her Excellency mentioned, it's very obvious the business case for diversity is and gender equality is undisputed and irrefutable. But on the personal front, I have two daughters, and I don't want them to grow up in a world where they make 80 cents to every dollar a man makes. And if they do that, then instead of working 9 to 5, they should be able to go home at 3:27, which is 80% of a normal work day. Now, of course, we know that that's not going to happen. So everything that I'm doing and everything that we all do is to have an equal playing field so that truly merit shines through. So with that, I'm going to hand over to our first panelist, Mr. Jason Moo, to quickly introduce himself, but also share what is it that motivates him and why does he feel a personal connection to this subject. Jason?
Thanks so much, Shai. So hi, everyone. I'm Jason. So I currently am the head of private banking for Southeast Asia and the branch manager for Singapore for Bank Julius Baer. Julius Baer is a pure play private bank, and Asia is our second home market. I have been in this, as I've been in this job shorter than United Women's Singapore has been around. Yeah, so I've been in this job for 7 months. Prior to that, I had spent 22 years at Goldman Sachs, and where I kind of came really into this cause for gender equality. And so, I don't need to talk much more about myself, but just about the motivation. Unlike Shai, I actually have 2 boys. And so, which is kind of unique, because if you ask most of the male champions of any of these causes, they actually do have daughters and they want them to grow up in a equal society. I have a different motivation. I want my children, I want my sons to fight for their right to excel in a society where they will have much more competition, because hopefully if everything is done well and done right, then there will be much more competition, because women will be playing a bigger part at every level of the organization. So so mine's slightly different motivation, but nonetheless pushes me to champion this cause.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jason.
That's it. Thank you.
And I can see that both you and I subconsciously took Her Excellency's views about positive masculinity to heart. We both are wearing pink to try to break down stereotypes, but that was not rehearsed. Thank you. Thanks, Jason. May I call upon Deborah next, please? Deborah Ho?
Sure. Her Excellency, Barbara Plinkert, Georgette, Shai, thank you so much for including me today. So I am the country head and I run Southeast Asia for BlackRock, which is a global investment management company. And, I don't ever remember not being passionate, about the cause. It could be a matter of upbringing. I had a very strong female-run household. My mother was a teacher and a school principal at the Convent of the Holy Infant Jesus. I was raised by a Cantonese nanny who came to Singapore when she was 14 years old to earn money to support her poor family of silkworm farmers in China. And so growing up in an all-girls school for me meant that I never had to face like not being included because of my gender. So if there was a school play and it's the Christmas play with Mary and Joseph, Joseph was a girl. And the 3 kings were actually the 3 queens. So in actual fact, we kind of never experienced it. And for me, my first encounter with feeling different because of my gender was in the corporate world when I started in finance. So for me, I'm extra passionate about it now. And the reason is because I think that, in order for, I would say, the future of humanity to thrive, we absolutely, have to grasp this situation and this time to make sure that there is not just gender parity or equality, but also be able to include, everyone in this world who has something to contribute. So that's my story.
That is beautiful, Deborah. Thank you. It's not something that people would necessarily associate with, saying if you grew up in a all-girls school, the first time you actually see the distinction between men and women is once you enter the corporate world. So I'm sure people on this panel and the audience would benefit from your experiences as well. So thank you for sharing that. And then last but not least, our third member on the panel, Her Excellency Barbara Plinkert. Georgette introduced her earlier, so I won't go through that again. But perhaps, Your Excellency, you want to just share your personal motivation, what draws you to the cause?
Yes, thank you. Indeed, I've been introduced already, so I say only a few words about myself. Before being posted in Singapore, I've had a career of going through various postings in different parts of the world. So I have seen plenty of countries in Central Asia, in Africa, in Asia. So it has been a very enlightening journey that I've done through many countries, and also being posted obviously in the heart of Europe, in our headquarters in Brussels as well. So what brought me to, or what drives me to the cause of gender equality is really looking at our own, having seen what I've seen in the world, in all the places I've been posted to, but also in our own institution. You know, when looking at my own institution, of course, there is also still a glass ceiling. You know, my institution, which is the European External Action Service, which is the European Union's foreign ministry, so to speak. You can see that at the entry level, you have 50-50. You have 50% women and 50% entry. We are not excluded from, you know, the same issue that is happening everywhere in the corporate world, in the public sector, everywhere. That you have, you know, women for reasons that need to be analyzed and addressed, not having the same opportunities to reach to the top level. And that, I think, is a missed opportunity. Like I said, that's why I brought the quote from our president, Ursula von der Leyen. I mean, the world is consisting of 50% men, 50% women. You lose out when you have only half of them participating at all levels. And that, I think, is you know, what drives me, and I think is important enough to make it a cause.
Thank you, Your Excellency. That is very powerful. And yes, indeed, if half of the population is not represented, it's like fighting a fight with one hand tied behind your back, which is not ideal. And we need equity, we need equality. For those of our participants who may have noticed, at least today's panel is balanced. So we have 50-50 on the panel. So this is not one of those classical, as they call, manels, where you only have men. So at least we're starting on the right base. Thank you for those introductions. Maybe we'll get into some of the question and answer. And Deborah, I'll start with you first. I appreciate you sort of sharing some of your experiences as you entered the corporate world, but do you mind sharing a little bit about how does the journey towards being a gender equal employer begin for a corporate? How does it begin for an organization? What are some of the first steps somebody can take? And do you mind sharing your own experiences?
Sure. I mean, I guess the benefit of hindsight, right, is that you kind of like, you know, hope that you don't make the same mistake twice. I think from what I've seen in many organizations, the first step really is having a genuine understanding and acknowledgement that there really is an issue. Okay, that status quo is not right. I mean, that in itself, you know, takes a lot. Okay, you know, I'd like to say that I think for most organizations, especially large publicly listed ones, you know, most of them have made that leap, right, to understand that there's a problem. The second thing is, you know, to understand that, you know, in order to address this issue, it has to be, you know, part and parcel of the business agenda. You know, why does this make sense, right? And again, you know, I'm actually quite hopeful because we've had, you know, studies, you know, over a number of years now, you know, about the benefits, you know, or the pure business sense, positive business sense of having diverse teams in diverse boards. Okay, so we don't know it. I feel that we don't need to talk about it anymore because there is sufficient empirical evidence. For those people who don't believe it, I suggest that, you know, they do some reading on their own, because there's a lot of literature, including, you know, what Her Excellency mentioned before in the EU. So I would say, okay, acknowledging that there's a problem, it's got to be part of, you know, an understanding that it impacts your bottom line and the way society views you. And this in turn affects your clients, you know, ability, or I would say their propensity to want to do business with you. It impacts your future and current employees as well. The next step is to make sure that it is filtered into processes, you know, whether it is obviously like hiring processes, but also employee processes in terms of policies about things like maternity leave, you know, family leave, you know, and really the whole understanding about a much more balanced workforce actually makes for a much more productive workforce. You know, so I actually like to think that, you know, we are now at a point in time where, because society demands that of companies to certainly be much more diverse, and to me that's probably like the first step of the ladder, because it's visible, you know, that companies, in order to thrive and even to survive in the current world today, really just need to take this first step. I hope that answers your question.
It does indeed. Thank you. And I'm sure we'll have more discussion later on in the panel because particularly with this greater push from society and societal expectations on diversity and representation, we're seeing that in every aspect of business. Consumers are voting with their feet, investors are voting with their feet, and making sure that companies actually take this thing seriously. But thank you. I think that's a great way to get us started. We'll come back to that later. Just a quick reminder to all our audience members, please use the chat function to ask any questions, and I'll make sure that we weave those questions in during the discussion. But also equally a shout out to all the panelists. Feel free to ask each other questions because only then panels are fun and we sort of learn something from the process. But thank you. Thanks for getting us started, Deborah. Maybe the second question is for Her Excellency. So if you think about COVID-19, and you spoke about this, and you spoke about the shadow pandemic, and I dare say that's an issue that we all have to get our heads around. But specifically, how do you think has COVID-19 affected organizations' attention to gender diversity? Has it taken more of a prominence, or will it cause companies to take a back seat on this issue of gender diversity?
Yeah, I think, in fact, COVID-19, I mean, speaking of my own institution, COVID-19 has really increased attention rather than diminished attention to gender diversity because of the, one of the issues that we see and has been prominently reported in all media is this shadow pandemic that is going on. I think it affects most societies. So also because of that, I think it becomes more prominent also in the discussions within organizations, within corporations. There's, I think, a very strong awareness, and the awareness is rising, that the pandemic has exacerbated risks and vulnerabilities because it's so prominent in society. Debated, it's being discussed. So, and on a very practical note, I think the burden that most women have more of in terms of childcare and home duties have become much more visible because everyone has had at least a period of having to work from home. In some places you can go back to your workplace, but in many cases people are still at home working from home. In many cases, space is not so huge, so there is a much more closer look at the reality of what it means to be at home, what it means to have a childcare around, also of the part of the household who's normally not as much involved, which is in most cases still the men. It is inevitable that it's more visible. The gender issues are more visible. When it comes to our institution, I think I would like to say a few more words about that as well. We have, together with Secretary General, called really on governments to put women and girls at the center of efforts to recover from COVID-19 because it's so important. So EU and member states have really taken concrete action to promote the rights of women and girls amid the pandemic. And we also monitor that all emergency measures taken are based on the EU's fundamental values, including really the principles of equality and non-discrimination. So, some concrete actions that we have taken at EU level is that 3 of our commissioners, one responsible for equality, for health and food safety, and the one for jobs and social rights, have to come together to give recommendations to all member states to mitigate the impact of the crisis on women and girls. So in areas such as, the division of work between men and women, violence against women and women in decision making. So this has been a very strong message from internally within the EU to all our member states. Also externally, we've done quite a lot. We've launched a support package to our partner countries around the world. 800 billion actually euro have been dedicated to ASEAN, and much of this is actually, protection and promotion of women and girls' rights are really at the center of this initiative, acknowledging that this is such an important topic within this pandemic. And also we have taken really concrete measures and to address the rise of domestic violence in the face of COVID-19 of COVID-19 restrictions. So there are a lot of initiatives and activities that we do at EU level. So it is not only within our daily work that we focus much more on it, but also internally providing support to staff, be it men or women, to help them to get through this crisis. I think this is another important point to make, that people who feel left alone in crisis, be it men or women, need support, psychological help sometimes to get through the crisis. I think that also discussion about equality.
Very good. Thank you, Your Excellency. That was really heartening to hear some of the efforts the European Union is making, and including some of the funding and support to this part of the world, to ASEAN. And I couldn't agree with you more that particularly women sort of have a disproportionately larger impact of COVID-19 in terms of duties in the family, particularly in Asia. The role of a woman is not just to take care of the children, but also in a lot of Asian contexts, also the parents and parents-in-law. So sort of you see this compression on both sides, but thank you. I really appreciate some of those sentiments. Jason, maybe shifting gears a bit and asking you a question. And in the theme about our panel being what motivates men to champion for gender diversity, and we've spoken about sort of giving women more opportunities and sort of promoting women and giving equal opportunities to men and women. I'll start with a question. There is some perception that this would lead to tokenism, and particularly sort of that we may be diverging from principles of meritocratic appointments and meritocratic process. And so my question is, how do we effectively communicate to our staff, to employees, that becoming gender equal is not a zero-sum game? What I mean by that is, it doesn't mean that women will replace the men or take away the jobs. It means that collectively we're going to be better off. So how do we alleviate some of this fear?
Thanks very much, Shai. I think I've mentioned this in several different contexts, but I still believe that the tone needs to be set from the senior management, where the leaders of the organization need to communicate that diverse mindsets are required to solve problems of today. So, for example, we just talked a little bit about COVID, and I work in an industry where we do, private banking coverage, and I can see the difference between the coverage of male relationship managers and female relationship managers. And during this time, you can really see, and again, this is a little bit of a stereotype, so I apologize for that, but I really do see the deep relationships that the female relationship managers have with their clients, because they really do care about their health, about the client's health, the well-being, family, safety, all of that. That's just built in them versus male RMs, again, being a bit of a general stereotype, being very kind of transactional about that, about asking the same questions, right? And I've seen female relationship managers go out of their way to send things to their clients to make sure that they're taken care of. I need masks, they will go find masks for them. I need this, they'll do everything they can just make sure the client's well-being is taken care of. Again, this is just a very plain vanilla, but and a very shallow view, but it's very important to show that the diverse mindsets and perspectives are very important, and these different approaches are needed today to help us with creative solutions for the problems that we have. So I think it's important that the senior management takes it upon themselves, which I try to do, to give equal responsibility and platforms to both genders to showcase the capabilities, and more importantly, why they are in those positions, right? It is incumbent for the senior managers to highlight these accomplishments, to showcase that it's not merely a tick tick the box exercise, which if you ask any male in a financial institution, especially my previous one, they would think that that's what this exercise is meant to do. Just tick the box and then we can move on. But the real changes we're trying to enforce, I mean, ultimately, we're trying to get away from the mindset, or actually just generally the need to promote gender equality, right? I mean, that is the ultimate goal. Where if we do what we can and try to achieve what we want to achieve, then there should be no need to promote this. And we go back to what you were talking about before, which is really focusing on meritocracy and capability without having to make any of those distinctions at all. We're still very far away from the ultimate goal of getting to that point, but I do think it starts with senior leadership in each firm to kind of push the agenda down to people and make them believe that that's an important element.
Well said, Jason. I mean, if we do this right, then we shouldn't need panels like this. But till that point, we do need them, because people do need a nudge, and people do need to look at examples and learn from other people's experiences. Thank you. I appreciate that. Maybe, Deborah, on that note, just a question to you. I mean, BlackRock sort of has over $7 trillion of assets under management. Your CEO, Mr. Fink, has probably been one of the strongest champions of ESG measures, including strong social governance measures. How do you use your role of investor stewardship to influence companies to promote gender equality?
Sure. So, I mean, just a little bit of, obviously, just to frame it a little bit for everyone. So BlackRock, as an investment manager, is a fiduciary. So what it means is that we don't invest our own money. We actually invest on behalf of clients who ask us to do so on their behalf according to a set of rules or parameters, right? But with regards to your questions on investment stewardship, okay, so we have probably one of the largest investment stewardship teams on the street. And there are a few things that we do, right? And of course, we influence, we engage in dialogue. And so that for us actually is really, really important, to talk, right? And not just to vote. Because voting often gets a high degree of attention. But like I said, engagement, is also very, very important. And it makes up a huge part of how we promote diversity. So it's how we build upon our understanding of a company's approach to governance and sustainable business practices, and how we communicate our views also ensure that companies understand what we expect. So this investment stewardship team I was talking about considers things like board diversity in context of evaluating a board's composition and effectiveness. I mean, we've had a focus on board diversity for a number of years now. And in 2020, our investment team year to date has had about 1,600 engagements on board composition, effectiveness, on diversity and all that, because we believe that this is really essential to delivering on the sustainable financial performance for companies. And we also recognize that diversity has multiple dimensions, right? So including personal factors, like gender, ethnicity, age, as well as other professional characteristics, such as a director's industry and area of expertise, geographical location, and all. So I think that it's important that we also acknowledge that academic research has demonstrated that diverse groups deliver better decisions, and that such groups are able to make better decisions given that participants are likely to be aware of multiple alternatives, as some of the panel has already mentioned. So I think for us it's a really serious responsibility, and that's why over a number of years we've actually built out this team way ahead of what was required by industry norms.
Fantastic, thank you. And that investment that you made in building up that team, I think, has influenced the industry, but also influenced companies because it has percolated throughout the business environment.
Yeah, so I guess the link between quality leadership, financial performance, and diversity.
Brilliant, thank you. Well noted. Your Excellency, maybe this next question to you, and maybe this is a question for all panelists, but maybe to start with you. Thinking about sort of the discussion so far, we've all acknowledged the importance of this. We've all acknowledged the importance of greater representation, of equality. We've spoken about the business case. We've spoken about, Jason mentioned how companies may need to be nudged towards effecting positive change. And one of these more prominent nudges has been this notion of mentoring and or sponsorship. And I think sponsorship sort of has a slightly different context and can be more powerful than mentorship. But maybe a specific question to start with you, and then I'll ask the same question to Deborah as well, is how important has mentoring and sponsorship been in your organization's gender diversity journey? Do you mind sharing a little bit more about that?
Yes, I'd actually like to do that, because mentoring is an important tool that we are utilizing. I'd like to hear more about sponsorship, because that is something on the other side we have not embraced yet. It might be coming, but we are not an organization. But mentoring is an important tool, and we do have quite some good outcome of it. My institution, the European External Action Service, started with the journey of mentoring actually only not so many years ago. And on the basis of some staff surveys. So in 5-6 years ago, we conducted staff surveys, which showed that people had concerns about the equality and their equality and career development prospects. So it was decided by our senior leadership, and I think there again, like what Jason said earlier, it's so important to have a top leader only invested in this part, because otherwise, it will not kick off. So it was kicked off by our senior leadership to create two working groups. One was on career development and one on gender and equal opportunities. And actually, I was part of the gender and equal opportunities working group, working task force. It was a task force. So we worked for several months on it and came up with a gender and equal opportunities strategy that we presented to our leadership. And this included a clear recommendation on mentoring. And in this context, let me just quote from one study that was done in the EU, from the Barcelona Graduate School of Economics, which is quite interesting. It says that whereas 87% of strong performing men enter the competition for management position, it's only 45% women. And this changes when women get advice or mentoring. More strong performing women enter the competition after having received advice when mentoring, up to 78%, without, like I said, 45%. Really, mentoring really helps to close the gender gap among strong performers. That's also why it's part and parcel of our strategy of gender and equal opportunities. So we've put in place policies for dedicated training, also talent spotting, coaching, and also mentoring of women who are new managers or in pre-management positions to aspire to become managers. And we've had several rounds of mentoring of women in pre-management positions by now. So since the end of the task force and since our recommendation, we've had several rounds of it. And we can say that almost everyone, most of those that were eligible for pre-management mentoring then actually really entered management positions. So it was really a first success that we can register here. And the system has also now been developed also wider, into a wider approach on building on the successes so far. So every newcomer into our organization now also has a right to a mentor. So if someone opts for a mentoring, they can do it. And there's specific focus on ensuring that some key post holders are mentored. For example, people who are aspiring to become ambassadors, new heads of administrations or in the administration area, but also personal assistants to ambassadors. There's specific key functions where we believe mentoring is a good tool, and so we are expanding this very much because we believe in it, and we've had good success and results from it.
Fantastic, thank you. And I love that University of Barcelona study you mentioned. We ran a similar experiment with a client where, I'll give you a quick 30-second spiel about this. We wrote a job description that had 10 tasks in it. And we knew that 3 out of those 10 tasks, nobody is going to achieve because they were super stretched. And then we sent that job description to a sample group of men and women. 80% of the men applied for the job, only 30% of the women applied for that job. So when men saw I meet 7 out of the 10 criteria, they said, yep, I'm ready for that job. When women saw that I meet 7 out of 10, they felt, oh, I need to develop more. So that's the role mentorship plays, to encourage women to take those risks. So thank you. That was really, really helpful. Deborah, do you mind sharing your perspectives on this question as well? How can sponsorship and mentorship help, and how has that been a part of your organization's gender diversity journey?
Sure. I think that we can take it as a given that it does help.
Yes.
So with BlackRock, across all our functions, geographies, there are a variety of such programs, right? We find that having mentorship programs that are targeted at specific corporate levels is important, to be able to not just deliver skill sets, for women, but at the same time, I can tell you that being a mentor over the years, I've learned a great deal from that process as well. So at BlackRock, there is a very structured approach, where we know what is required of mentors, what our mentees, supposed to be delivering, and there are certain, milestones, where we do, check-ins and the like. So mentorship programs are also done in conjunction with leadership training programs that we have, for women, again, at different corporate titles. So we can marry the skill set development training, together with the practical, advice that comes from mentoring. However, the importance of sponsorship, cannot be over exaggerated actually, because the thing is, I think we all know that women, we have a tough time advocating for ourselves, but we advocate for each other, right? And I've been in many meetings where I've seen, the way, I guess, if a woman is not top of mind, she doesn't get thought of or mentioned when there is a plum opportunity. So, you know what, in the old days, I guess sponsorship was spontaneous. And if you happen, to be in the right circles or play the right sport, then one does get noticed. But at BlackRock, what we do is we have a deliberate attempt to make sure, that people do get that chance. So I know that some people have different views about how, like specific programs are contrived, but I do believe that these things need to happen at least initially to get it all going. And I've seen numerous instances of how good opportunities go to those who are sponsored, and there's also a halo effect, around the people who are deemed to be sponsored by certain individuals in the organization, not just in BlackRock, but at other places as well. So I think at our firm, because we take such a structured approach, and people understand what the expectations are, and it's very, very transparent, and so, it works quite well. So we have actually a program called Elevate. Actually, it's run out of EMEA, and it's for associate level women, so one below VP. And it is run by actually the VP and director women, sponsored by MDs of, both men and women. And what we do is that we hot house, I would say women who are 20 to 30 women at a time, who put up their hands, and who actually go in and apply, to join these programs. So they're not just nominated, but they have to want to do that as well. So I think all these things, culminate, in a workforce that is enabled, and especially, women who feel that this is an organization that is invested in a long-term development.
Thank you, Deborah. That's very, very helpful. And I completely appreciate the journey and the story and the strategy behind this, because it seems very deliberate. Thank you. Jason, maybe just turning to you, similar sort of theme, but perhaps what would help the audience is also your own personal experiences. So maybe a question around, do you mind sharing your personal experience on how you have continued your efforts for promoting gender diversity and inclusion across the organizations that you've worked with over the years? And why is this so important?
So, I mean, to be honest, I started getting more involved in the cause of gender equality back in 2014 when my job at Goldman first moved back to Singapore, and I was just here more often. And so at first it was part of to be brutally honest, corporate citizenship on my part, and not something I felt strongly about when I first took up the mantle of being an MD sponsor for the Women's Network. But it was through the interactions with outside organizations and internal networks that I realized the struggles women have to go through in order to do the things that men would normally not even think twice about. And such as, you know, just shouldering more of the responsibility of childcare at home while balancing work versus men who don't even think twice about it, present company included, just me, by the way, or just having a more casual environment at work where relationships can be formed, like drinks after work or on a regular basis, when it's maybe a little bit more kind of difficult for women to participate. For the aforementioned reason that they have to go back and take care of that, or expected to go back to take care of the family. And generally, maybe it's just the way I was brought up. I don't like the concept of inequality or inequity in any form whatsoever. And hence I just felt the bigger desire to stand by the cause. And at my previous firm, which I have had, you know, obviously 22 years of experience relative to my 8 months here at Julius Baer, I did various things to lend my sponsorship, besides lending my sponsorship to the Women's Network, that I thought was important to advance the cause. For example, I tried to push the agenda for returning mothers to the workforce by participating in outside organization events. Actually, I personally hired a woman back to become a relationship manager after 4 years away from work, because just because. I mean, the person, she was good, and she was good, she was motivated, extremely smart. The fact that she took 4 years away from work didn't mean anything to me. And I'm glad to say she's now doing really well. In my previous firm, she's a team head, and one of the bigger producers in the office, which I was very happy to see. But like, I think there's just sometimes mental gap for some hiring managers to go like, I don't like this gap because I think this person's out of touch. But again, from my perspective, you always hire for talent and train for skill. So you see the person, you identify the motivation, and then you get behind that, right? And the other thing is, as some people will know, I was a male champion for the Financial Women's Association when I was at Goldman, and I was de-championed when I left my old firm. But I applied to be re-championed again when I joined my new firm to highlight my commitment to the cause, right? And I believe my head of my Women's Network is on the call as well, as she always is, in any of the calls I do. But we just met last week to kick off a series of events to make it more regular in my bank, to have a senior talk series, mentoring program, and all these kind of things. And again, I got to understand, I have to also mention that different firms are different in their curve for gender equality, right? So the American firms, as Deb would agree, are probably much more advanced than the European firms. No offense, I think it's just the American firms have just had it in there. And I don't remember, and I was at Goldman for 22 years, I don't remember a time when there was not a women's network. And so, whereas at probably my bank, which is a Swiss bank, it's probably a little bit more on the nascent side of that equation. I mean, we've made some good progress, but I think we could be a little bit more structured as we go along. So I think we just again go back to my original comment on like senior leadership and the tone we set. We just need to we'd be a little bit more aggressive to make sure people realize that this is important. So it's just my personal journey and why it's important.
That's fascinating, Jason. I'm sure other people here would agree that we need more of you. And I particularly love the championing, de-championing, re-championing, because it was something that was so important to you on a personal level that you felt that that needs to happen. So I really appreciate you sharing that story. Thank you. We are, I mean, I could talk about this all day and I'd love to hear your views about this all day, but we're running short of time. So we probably have another 10 or 12 minutes left. So I'm going to move to some of the questions that are coming in through the poll or through the Q&A function on Zoom. And there is this very interesting question, and I apologize in advance if we can't go through all of them, but I'll pick some that I think we can discuss today. This is a very interesting question from Tiffany, who's asked, she's come across this concept called glass cliff, and there is a lot of academic research on this as well. And essentially what glass cliff implies is, as opposed to a glass ceiling, glass cliffs are when women are appointed to leadership roles in companies which are destined to fail, or companies that are going through tough times. And so when the business does actually fail, people point fingers to the women and they say the failures are attributable to the fact that they had a woman leader. So the question, Tiffany's question is, of course, that's a fallacy. And she would love to hear the panelists' thoughts on the glass cliff. Anybody?
I was going to say the woman is the one who had the courage to take that job, right?
Precisely. Precisely.
Right? And who says that women don't like risk?
Well said. Well said.
You know, I tell you, you know, leadership takes courage. Okay, and I'm sure all of you agree with me, right? You know, and you know, there's no success is never guaranteed. So I think that we need to actually respect and honor the people who have the courage to take up the mantle, and you know, really rescuing a company is like fighting a cause. Okay, so we also have to think about who are the people who actually coined that phrase and write those articles. Okay, and we should make sure that articles, you know, that actually give credit to the people who have the guts to do so should be written as well.
Well said. We should also celebrate not just people who've taken on these jobs and succeeded, but also people who've taken on these jobs and had the courage to try to turn the business around. Very well said. Any other thoughts? Because this does come up and it goes back to sort of this notion of tokenism that we spoke about earlier, that when women are appointed in senior leadership roles, there is generally a concern that they're appointed in roles that are actually very difficult. And what is the role that we all can play, either as board members or as senior leaders, to make sure that we're giving right opportunities to women as well? Barbara, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't think we have exactly this kind of a problem in a public administration. So it's a bit different. But I think what we also do see is that less women apply for leadership roles. I think it's the argument that you brought earlier, and that is also into this same issue, you know, where women are apparently more reluctant to put themselves out there because they might not fulfill the whole range of qualifications that are necessary for a job. We do see that in our institution as well. We work actively on encouraging women to be brave enough to apply, or not to be brave. It's natural. They have to make them confident enough to apply to positions that are out there. So I think this is part of it, possibly, and that is something that possibly would need to be researched. Is it that women also easier take a blame when there is a failure? Is that something that needs to be looked into? Is it like something where women need to also be picked up and taken through situations where there is a failure and where it's easier to blame women than men? That is something I think could be discussed and would be interesting to research further.
Fascinating thought. Yes, I hadn't actually thought about that. That's a good point. Thank you. We may come back to that later in the conversation, but then there is just questions are coming in fast and furious. There's one question, and this is specifically to Deborah, but any panelist is welcome to answer this, is how do you measure inclusion? And so the question is from Urvi, saying inclusion is the backbone and hence critical to build diversity in any organization. So how do you measure inclusion? Perhaps we'll start with Deborah, and then Jason, keen to hear your views as well.
Yeah, so the thing is this, right? I mean, when one measures for gender, it's probably one of the simplest things to measure for, which is why I think maybe people start with that, right? Then you move into things like, ethnicity. And then it starts actually to get a lot more complicated, right? But, the way that I feel is most effective is when you do employee opinion surveys, you want to see how engaged your people are and how included they are. Okay, so in BlackRock Singapore, we have 448 people. We have 24 nationalities. Okay, and so it really is a melting pot, right? And the mantra that I have, for BlackRock Singapore is, everyone has a place here. So everyone has a place in BlackRock Singapore. We're here for our families, for ourselves, and our purpose here is to do well for each other and our clients. Okay, so the thing is, when everyone feels included, your employee, your EOS scores will show. Okay, and in a way, you think it's direct, but the ultimate effect is a much more engaged and a happy workforce. I mean, for me, that's key. People want to be appreciated and included.
Great, thank you. Jason, any thoughts on this?
Sure. I mean, I think obviously it's easy. I mean, it's not easy, but it's more apparent to address the pyramid of gender representation at rising levels of seniority in a firm, right? So I think we the statistics do not lie, and the data clearly shows in most firms, including mine, the entry level positions all tend to be fairly balanced, or maybe even more a little tilted towards female. But as it gets more senior, that representation of men versus women becomes much more skewed, right? And so at the most senior levels, probably you don't have as balanced as we would like to be. I think that's more, that's, I won't say apparent, but that's easier to fix from a visibility perspective by just promoting more women or hiring more women in the senior levels in order to get that balance, right? But I think the more important issue is just making sure that that going back to an earlier comment, which is make sure that people don't have kind of this how do we call it, this bad feeling that this people are up there because they're ticking the box, or we need to fill a quota, right? I think it's important to get people's opinions in, and from an inclusion perspective, just to make sure that you showcase why this person is up there, whether it's a guy or a girl, a male or female. I think it's important to showcase why the people are in those senior positions. And in all honesty, as we mentioned before, as when we talked about the previous question, the glass cliff, I think it's if you're daring enough to raise your hand to be a leader, I mean, that's guts that almost, mass majority of people don't have. So I think it's important for us not only to address that pyramid shape of gender representation, but it's more important to also solicit and make sure that people know why they are up there, right? And highlight the skill sets and highlight the accomplishments of people who are there, so that everyone feels, okay, good, this is something I can look forward to, and and especially if you have a proper gender balance at the senior levels, then you create role models as well, and hence the virtual cycle of mentoring and then bringing up the next pipeline of women will come along. So I think we all need to kind of create a virtual cycle of balance in that perspective.
Perfect, thank you. Well said. And that virtuous cycle is something that we are all aspiring towards. So I know we're getting sort of in the last 5 or 6 minutes, so maybe a couple of questions and then we'll start rounding up, and I'll ask each of the panelists to share their final thoughts in a couple of minutes. But Your Excellency, maybe a question for you. I think this is, there's a question in the chat here saying that the challenges faced by women in Europe are, could be very different to the situation people face or women face in Asia. And sort of from your vantage point, you worked across several markets. You worked in Europe, you worked in Asia, in Central Asia, in a few different geographies. Which of the policies from EU do you think could apply here? What could we learn, this part of the world, Southeast Asia, Singapore, learn and build on the experiences from EU?
Okay, that's a difficult question, because actually also within the EU we are extremely diverse. You know, we have all kinds of policies being implemented in every single EU country. Of course, we look at the policies, we compare, we do assessments, we also make recommendations also at European level. But really, what is being implemented at national level is very diverse also in the EU. So from that point of view, it's kind of difficult to say this is what works and this is what should be done in other parts of the world. It's not something that you know, that works. You know, what we do in some parts of the EU may not be applicable to this part of the world. But I think there are various kinds of policies and kinds of approaches that can be taken. For example, when you look at quotas, you know, quotas are being implemented in some member states, but actually not that many. We have only four member states where quotas are you know, implemented at the board level. And other countries under other member states take other measures. We learn from those. We see what works in which countries. We share this knowledge within the EU, and we share it also externally to share best practices with other countries. And then it's really a matter of looking at what works best for each country. But I think what is very important is to look at the mindset. You know, that is something where everything starts. I think it was here the Minister of Home Affairs here who has said that there needs to be a change of mindsets. I think I said it also in my speech at the onset. You know, there's still plenty of gender stereotypes, not only in the not only here but also in the EU. We have them everywhere. If you don't break up gender stereotypes, and if you don't change mindsets in order to make people understand why is it important to have an inclusive approach and to include you know, women as much as well as men in businesses and everywhere in society, then it will be very difficult. So I think a change of mindset and, you know, communicating what it is, what it means to involve women more, I think is a good starting point. I mean, everyone has started, but really focusing on that in countries where maybe gender diversity is not as much as advanced as in other countries. Another you know, thing that I think works and needs to be looked at in every company, in every organization, is to look at how do we empower women to take their career more forcefully by putting in place balance policies, ensuring that women can be beyond their duties at home and the childcare duties that are still in a majority as a majority in the hands of women. How can they still pursue a career? So this is something that I think every company can look into to see how can we empower women to nevertheless pursue their careers. So there are many, and I think it's not something where we can say we have a silver bullet and this is what we can recommend to other parts of the world.
Very well said. It's not a lift and shift, because even countries like you were alluding to, sort of who've had quotas, they've had some unintended consequences come from quotas. One very notable study is Norway, which had quotas on board diversity. They probably have very strong representation of women on boards, but the unintended consequences are not enough women CEOs, because probably the more qualified women sit on boards rather than take on management roles. So very well said. Thank you. Perhaps my last question, and then we'll start rounding up. So Jason, question for you. And you spoke about earlier what your passion is sort of driving. What's driving this to you is your two sons. You want them to fight. You want them to have to prove themselves and have a level playing field. But maybe sort of the question is, we all acknowledge that the issue of gender equality must start from educating our children on this issue. What are some of the things that you are doing, or the active steps you're taking to educate not just children, but also the people who work with you, your teams, on the importance of gender equality?
Oh, wow. I think it's just, that's a hard question, only because it comes from two different views, right? Or two different approaches. One is children, and
Sure.
One is a corporate culture. And although one could make an argument that both can be used in the same way, so one can argue both. But look, I think I've taught my sons, if anything else, that that one should not view a person as a guy or a girl, or this is typically what a girl does and this is typically what a boy does, right? I mean, it's got to demolish any form of kind of stereotypes as to what people should be doing, right? And I mean, it's kind of clear in my household, my wife runs the household and literally is my boss. So I don't think they have any misconceptions about that. But and there's definitely I think there's gender inequality, because I think the guys don't have as much power as the women in my household. But nonetheless, I mean, I think it's important for everybody to just see, and that's what I tell my managers all the time, or my one downs, or the people, the people in my firm, is that you cannot see people and expect the same type of answers. You can't expect, kind of aggressive answers coming out of a male or a female. You should just look at the quality of the answers and the quality of work a person produces, and then promote people based on that, right? Because you can't expect, oh, this person's not aggressive enough. But yeah, but the work that the person produced is still very, very good, and I don't understand why you need to have a person raise his or her hand in order to get the promotion. So I think it's always something that I'm always trying to get people to understand, is look past a gender, look past a response, and look into the quality of work and frankly the loyalty and the leadership that the person produces, in order to kind of select the pipeline of people for promotion next time. So look, I don't think I'm so far away from achieving anything I would like to achieve, but everything starts with education and just making sure people see it, as Her Excellency mentioned before. I think it's a mindset issue, right?
Thank you, Jason. Clear and well appreciated. Thank you. So, okay, we have a couple of minutes, so we'll just quickly round up. So maybe I'll start with you, Deborah. Just your final thoughts, or any counsel that you may have to the participants here, because as we're thinking about this big, hairy subject, right, what would be your key takeaways that people can mull over and sort of start making positive change?
A few things, right? I hope that, the audience consists of a good balance between male and female leaders, so I think that it's important to have that balance, for such events, because I think that, we've gone through generations of women trying to fix women, or men trying to fix women, when really, the right now, especially with this opportunity that COVID is presenting us, I feel that we need to seize this moment, right? And because I don't think that we're at a point where the world still needs convincing, that gender diversity is a good thing for business and for the world. So to everyone out there who has fought for this, it still goes on. And I know that sometimes, you ask yourselves, I've been doing it for X number of years and the numbers haven't changed that much. But you know what? I think that mindsets are beginning to change. And that's because the flow of money is changing, whether it's through governments or whether it's through the pressures that society is putting on this issue. But I believe that we are at an inflection point. So seek strength from each other, because the journey still goes on. But I think that this is our time.
Well said.
Thank you,
Well
Shai.
said, Deborah. Thank you very much. Jason, could we come to you next? Any final thoughts that you may have? In the earlier part, you mentioned sort of we've got to move past our own biases, but any final thoughts that you may have or counsel for the audience members?
I think we talked a lot about mentoring, and we all believe that mentoring is an important element to the whole thing. And I think the other part to it, which is also equally important, is reverse mentoring. Is I think senior leaders need to hear from women and hear about the struggles they go through. And I do think that one thing I will take away from this is I need to make sure my managers as well receive reverse mentoring in order to understand the struggles people go through and that women go through, and how do we kind of conquer that. So look, I think at the end of the day, this is a fight that all of us have to internalize and build on our own. And I go back to my original answer, which is this starts from the top. So I think the top management and senior management at each firm needs to internalize this and make this a priority.
Thank you, Jason. Well said. And again, you serve as an inspiration to quite a few people on this call. So thank you. Your Excellency, perhaps we'll end with you, your couple of thoughts and counsel that you may have to people listening.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to come back to the topic of this panel discussion about how do we motivate men in this discussion on gender equality. I think inclusion requires an inclusive process. That is so important. So we cannot exclude men from this discussion. We have to include them. Sometimes we have to force them to be included. I still remember my own experience of the Gender and Equal Opportunities Task Force. We had, we first announced it would be happening, and we requested people to, to put up their applications to join this task force. There were, mainly women who applied to participate in this task force. So we actively looked for men. It was not a 50-50 task force in the end. We did not manage to have 50-50, but we had several men joining. And it was so important to have them because it showed, what are the fears, what are the issues, why is it so unusual for men to talk about gender still, So to include them and to use them also as then further down the line to become ambassadors for gender equality through this process of including them has been extremely enriching and extremely important. And I think I cannot overemphasize this more. It's so important to take men along in this process because it can be, a frightening process in a way, and it is breaking the stereotype that we are all used to. So include everyone in this process. That is the appeal I would make.
What a fantastic summary. And this is always a sign of a good panel when the moderator doesn't have to summarize things at the end. So I'll try not to do that, and I won't take any more of your time. Your Excellency, this is a good segue also to the next section where Georgette is going to talk about the winners. But before I hand over to Georgette, thank you on behalf of this panel. Thank you on behalf of UW and everybody who's listening to the panelists. We really appreciate your counsel. We really appreciate all the insights that you've shared. I've learned a lot. So thank you again, Deborah, Jason, and Your Excellency. Thank you. Georgette, over to you.
Thank you so much, Shai, and thank you for being a wonderful moderator, keeping that conversation going and keeping everybody at the edge of their seats because, there were lots of questions. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to all of them, but we know that this conversation continues in different forms, in different platforms, but it continues. And a big thank you, a huge thank you to our panelists, Your Excellency, Barbara Plinkert, of course, Jason Moon and Deborah Ho. Really appreciate the insights, the honesty with which you responded to the questions and shared your own experiences. It's not often that I think our audience gets an opportunity to hear such honesty. So we really appreciate that. We have, however, come to the moment, the part that I think many of us have been waiting for, where we announce the winners of this year's Gender Equality Impact Awards. Despite the fact that it was an extremely challenging year, to say the least, we were encouraged that we still received a really good number of submissions and applications. And here's the interesting thing, they were all of really high caliber. So it really demonstrates that gender equality is still front and center. It's on everybody's agenda. But what has resulted is that this has made it really a difficult task for our judging panel. That said, you know, they put their heads together, they huddled, and I am pleased to announce this year's winner, starting first with the first category of Gender Equality Impact at Work. So it's the organizations category. And this year's winner is Unilever. Unilever, as many of you know, Unilever Asia is a leading global supplier with a very wide range of home beauty and food products with a global footprint. And Unilever has undertaken a conscientious and sustained effort to support gender equality, focusing especially on their employees' wellness and implementing D&I, nurturing female talent all along the way. And this year, they were pleased to report that they achieved gender balance in management, at the management level. The judges recognized that Unilever's efforts not only targeted internally to their employees, but also externally through their Sustainable Living Plan, which since its launch in 2010, has actually provided 2.34 million women access to opportunities and the means to develop their skills. So congratulations, Unilever. As I mentioned earlier, the judges had a really difficult time because of not just the number of applications and submissions, but the quality. And because of that, they also wanted to make a special honorary mention to another organization for their progress and performance in this space. And in this workspace category, the judges wanted to recognize Goldman Sachs for their efforts to support their employees' wellness and high rates of hiring of female talent, particularly in the analysts and associate categories. Externally, Goldman Sachs is well known for its GS launch program and also their commitment to support and invest in women's businesses around the world. So congratulations, Goldman Sachs Singapore. The next category is that of our male change maker. And here, I'm pleased to announce our winner is Shehzad Hamid Ahmad. Shehzad is a 34-year-old Singapore-based Pakistani filmmaker and broadcast journalist. His documentary, Flight of the Falcons, highlighted Pakistan's battle against illiteracy, with particular focus on the issue of girls' education. This documentary actually helped advocate the Pakistani government to make girls' education a priority. It didn't stop there, and Shehzad created another documentary, another film, Nepal's Child Brides, raising awareness on the practice and serious problem of child marriages. The judges were extremely impressed by Shehzad's inspirational work and the range of impact. Congratulations, Shazad. Our next category is that of Changemaker Female. And for this award, I am delighted to announce this year's winner, Christine Amour-Levar. Christine, as many of you know, is founder of Women on a Mission and Her Planet Earth. She is a passionate and tireless advocate for women's issues, climate change, and sustainability. And she has raised on countless occasions funds for a number of charities and causes in Singapore, including supporting disadvantaged girls at the Pertapis Center for Women and Girls, and increasing financial literacy and entrepreneurship for disadvantaged women through IDA. We all know her as an outstanding role model and partner, and basically an amazing person, a generous woman who gives 100% to everything that she touches. Our next category is that of gender equality impact in the category of youth. Here, I'm pleased to announce our winner is Carissa Chiao. Carissa is a student at NUS and one of the co-founders of a program called Students for a Safer NUS. They founded this initiative as a response to a growing concern of instances of sexual violence and breaches of privacy of female students on campus. The idea is to provide a response to this growing concern, but also to improve how NUS is handling sexual violence incidences themselves. The judges were very impressed by the institutional impact of Carissa's initiative. Congratulations, Carissa. And as I mentioned earlier, judges had a tough time because there were so many good applications and so many good submissions. And in this category for youth, they wanted to confer honorary mention to one other deserving youth. And this is Isabelle Stefani Jeffries. She is currently a student at United World College, Southeast Asia, here in Singapore. And she has a real passion for advancing gender equality and for volunteering. We know for a fact that she has spent many an hour volunteering, not only for women's causes, but also providing meals for the needy and launching awareness and fundraising programs to empower women, girls, and also to help the homeless. So congratulations, Isabelle. We're very, very proud of you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our awards, but also, and also our panel discussion. I hope you all enjoyed the session. I hope you went away with a couple of thoughts, a couple of action points that you want to pursue. And it leaves me now to thank everybody who made this possible, all our partners. I referenced at the start our partnerships that we would not be able to do anything without. So again, a huge thank you and a big thank you to our partner, in this instance, the European Union Delegation in Singapore, for making this possible, working with us hand in hand. Our judges who formed our judging panel. Shai, of course, who was great moderator, and our panelists who led us through an engaged and enlightening panel discussion. And I hope you as an audience also walked away with a raised awareness on how you can be also promoting gender equality, and also how men can champion for greater gender equality here in Singapore. Again, thank you to everybody. Please watch this space because we will be having more interesting and engaging activities, I guarantee you, before the end of the year. And if you would be so kind as to scan the QR code that you see on screen to provide us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And you can also email us or reach us through our social channels. Please continue to support us. It's been, as we all talked about, a challenging year. And as a nonprofit, as one that depends on funds raised by ourselves, you know, we need to get the continued support of all our partners. So thank you again for your time, your commitment, your energies, and your continued presence here with us, here at United Women Singapore. Thank you for your time this afternoon.